Hello, it's Catherine again with another introduction to a podcast that will help your legal English a lot. This one is from a few months ago, actually. It was a big story, but I don't think you should miss it. It's about one man fighting injustice in the criminal courts, the civil courts, and eventually being made a Sir by Her Majesty the Queen. Here we go, the Post Office scandal. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Have I got a story for you this week?
I feel like every week you've got a wonderful story for me, but I'm ready for this week.
Well, last week I talked about a fence.
You did.
I mean, it was quite interesting, but this week, I've just written down this is a true story.
Okay.
And I've written down somewhere the areas of law that it goes through.
Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
Starts with contracts, then into crime,
Okay.
quickly out of crime into claims for compensation about the crime.
Right.
Then we've got a data breach,
Okay.
then a tax issue,
Right.
and it all ends in a TV show that our listeners can watch if they want to, because no one could believe that all of those things happened. And in fact, the story isn't ended yet. It's still going on.
This is the equivalent of last week's fence, where it started with one thing and ended with another thing.
Well, you know, Rachel, when you study law, which I did, your law professors put everything in really tidy boxes. Criminal law, contract law, and then you go into real life.
And it all goes the wrong way.
It goes the wrong way. So before I begin, we need to define something. The story we're about to talk about is the biggest miscarriage of justice in British legal history. It is a terrible story. So we need to define miscarriage of justice. How we're going to do that?
Oh.
I know. We know the meaning of words, but then when you have to define them for people, it becomes harder. A typical miscarriage of justice is someone goes to prison for 20 years for something they didn't do, and then the government says, oh, sorry, you can go home.
I just read about a case recently where a man was put in jail after he supposedly murdered somebody, and DNA evidence that's just came out has acquitted him.
Yes, and that's why we don't have the death penalty in the United Kingdom, because you can't let people go home when you find there's been a miscarriage of justice.
Yeah.
This, believe it or not, this story that goes through crime and contract and data and tax begins with the British Post Office.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're talking Royal Mail, or
We're talking, yeah, we are. And you think of the British Post Office and you think kind of an Agatha Christie story where, you know, Miss Marple or Hercule Poirot pop to the post office. But of course, the modern post office isn't like that.
No.
Everything is very fast and automated. And this begins with a contract between a person who runs a local post office and the post office, the government department that runs the post office.
Yeah.
So if you want to run your local post office, Rachel, where you live, you can. You've got to get all kinds of background checks and things.
Yeah.
But then you get a contract. So the contract is the first thing. Now, before we get into the contract, the reason our post offices It's a good thing I'm only drinking water.
Yeah.
The reason they have so much money is they're not just Royal Mail.
No.
They pay out benefits, government benefits to people who are entitled to benefits.
Mhm.
Now, your old age pension counts as a benefit.
Mhm.
So let's imagine you're 75 years old and the government gives you something awful like £220 a week.
Lucky
We've
me.
got the lowest pensions in Europe.
Yeah.
When I was a child, I would go with my grandmother to the post office to get her pension, and the cashier would give her cash.
Mm.
Now, you go in and you swipe your bank card through the post office machinery,
Yeah.
and that transfers the money into your bank account.
Mhm.
Unemployment benefits as well. If you are not working and you get the basic money from the state to basically keep you alive, that's a benefit. So a lot of money going through these small local post offices.
Yeah.
Now, a few years ago, the post office decided to install a new financial accounting system
Mhm.
called Horizon.
Okay.
Now, Horizon was bought from a company headquartered in Japan called
Mhm.
Fujitsu,
Yeah.
and every post office in the country got a Horizon terminal.
Mhm.
And it was to balance the accounts. Now, when you balance the accounts, and this isn't my area at all, the machine tells you how much money you should have at the
Mhm.
end of the day. It says this much came in, this much went out, your balance therefore is this.
Mhm.
And that's what Horizon did. Now, if we come to the contract between, say, a post mistress in the
Mhm.
town where I live and
Mhm.
the post office, she would sign a contract that says if there is any shortfall on that balance,
Mhm.
she's personally liable for it.
Okay.
So the next word we have to define here is shortfall.
So it's like not enough.
Not enough,
Yeah.
perfect, yeah. You could translate it as deficit.
Mhm.
I think most British people would say shortfall,
Yeah.
but I have heard our students, our lawyers, say, she means a deficit.
Yeah.
So my local postmistress would sign a contract to say she will use the Horizon terminal and she is personally liable for any shortfall at the end of every day.
Okay. Is that common? It seems like a crazy like term.
It does seem like a crazy term, and
Yeah.
later in this story, a High Court judge is going to agree with you, Rachel.
Yay! I'm glad
Yeah,
I'm talking truth.
you're
That's
absolutely right. So, just to repeat that, she has signed a contract that
Mhm.
says she is personally liable for any shortfall
Mhm.
on the Horizon balance
Mhm.
at the end of the working day, and she is dealing with people's pensions, unemployment benefits, taking in payment for post and parcels, and everything else. It's a huge amount of money
Mm.
every day. Well, immediately when Horizon was installed in every post office in the country,
Mhm.
the postmasters and postmistresses thought, every day it's telling me there's a shortfall.
Mm.
And some of these shortfalls are huge. Like
Yeah.
not £9, £9,000 shortfall.
Wow.
And they began to think this is impossible. This
Yeah.
cannot be right. So they were calling the helpline
Mhm.
because, of course, there's a helpline. You never speak to someone directly. You've got to telephone the
Yeah.
helpline. And you know, Rachel, this is the really wicked part of this story. About 500 postmasters and postmistresses called the helpline and said there must be a problem with the Horizon system. And each of them were told there isn't. It's impossible for it to be wrong. And you are the only one who's having a problem.
Oh my God.
Yes, and there were more than 500 of them. And this is the British Post Office, one of the most trusted organisations in the country. Now, imagine you are a working postmistress in a small town. You press the button on Horizon to balance your books, and it says, "Sorry, Rachel, there's a £9,000 shortfall, and you are liable for it."
I think I'd cry.
Well, let me tell you the effects on these people,
Yeah.
each of whom thought they were the only one. A lot of them put their own money in to make up the shortfall and became bankrupt. And when you become bankrupt, you usually lose your home. It's almost impossible to get credit for a period of 7 years, so they can't borrow money. A lot of people get divorced. A lot of people go to the doctor with terrible stress, and there are 4 suicides. Because the computer cannot be wrong, according to the post office. Now, here's another terrible part. Those who could not make up the shortfall with their own money were prosecuted in the criminal courts by the post office. Can you imagine your life? All you did was, sign a contract to run a small country post office. Suddenly you're in the criminal court. Let's talk about grounds.
Yeah.
Now, that word grounds is the legal basis for prosecuting someone. So if someone's in a criminal court, the grounds might be murder, robbery, shoplifting. There are lots of different grounds. The grounds against these poor people were theft and false accounting.
But surely they would have had the phone calls and that sort of thing, like logs to say that they tried to make an effort to.
But the post office prosecuted them in the criminal court regardless. And a lot of them were found guilty. They were found guilty by a jury, I think. Yeah, they must have been. So there's one particular lady whose story I watched on the BBC. She had a child at home and she was 8 weeks pregnant and she was taken away in handcuffs and put in prison because of a shortfall that she could not pay in the Horizon computer system.
This might be the worst story you've ever told me.
It gets better. Just
okay.
This is why it's the biggest miscarriage of justice in British legal history. Hundreds of people went to jail. Hundreds of people suffered terrible stress, got divorced, lost their home. And then a fantastic website, let me find the name, Computer Weekly. Computer Weekly, a small computer website, ran a story that said there have been problems with Horizon for many years, and the makers of Horizon, Fujitsu, have always known it.
Oh,
yeah. So now we get the real hero of our story.
Yeah.
The first hero is the Computer Weekly website.
Yeah.
The second hero, he might be the greatest Briton of all time, better than Winston Churchill or Shakespeare. A very ordinary, very good man called Alan Bates. And when this story appeared in Computer Weekly, Alan Bates was a postmaster, and he had never broken under this stress. He insisted and insisted there was something wrong with Horizon.
Yeah.
And at last, there's evidence in Computer Weekly there are many problems, and Fujitsu always knew. He started a campaign called Justice for Postmasters. And he said, all these terrible things have happened to these people, including me,
Yeah.
and now something has to be done about it.
Uh-huh.
So at first the post office ignored him, but then quite a few members of parliament, our politicians, got interested in this, and they are really powerful.
Yeah.
When a politician, a member of parliament is interested, they can do things that the ordinary public cannot do. So they appointed a firm of forensic accountants. Now, we all know that word forensic from crime,
Yeah.
but this is forensic accountancy. So can you imagine what a forensic accountant does? It sounds like an awful job.
It does. Well, accountancy is to do with money and that sort of thing. So, do they like trace money?
Exactly. They're investigative accountants. And they found that actually there weren't shortfalls, that there were bugs in Horizon, and that all of these people had suffered all of this awfulness for absolutely nothing. So, led by my favourite Briton, Alan Bates, all of these people, 555, that's a big group.
That's a big group.
They started what's called a class action lawsuit against the post office. And they did it in the High Court in London, led by Alan Bates. And they got a fantastic, fair judge who said, one, this contract is unfair. They cannot be held personally liable. That is void.
I like this judge.
Yeah. They're pretty good usually. The second thing the judge ruled was, without doubt, the Horizon computer system contained, I've got it, errors, bugs, and defects.
Yeah.
Now, this is why no one likes lawyers, okay? The case was settled for £58 million. 58 million the post office was told to pay these 555 people. So they should all get a share of £58 million. But first you have to deduct costs. Do you know whose costs you deduct? The lawyers. And the court fees. Rachel, do you even want to guess?
No.
Well, the award was 58 million, and after the lawyers and the courts have taken their money, there was 12 million left.
Oh,
Well, don't do that face, be a lawyer.
I can't. I can't, and I refuse to be.
It is awful, isn't it?
It is.
Costs, if my calculations are correct, the costs were £46 million. So the lawyers got far more money than the victims.
No, I don't like this. You know, you bring me on here. You give me awful situations.
And then the lawyers always win.
And then the lawyers always win.
But I'm the mum of a lawyer, so I don't mind. It means when I'm very, very old, there'll be enough money to look after me. But yeah, that must have been terrible for these people. So now 555 of them are sharing £12 million, not 58.
I'm not going to try and do the maths on that, but it's not a lot.
It's not, I haven't done the maths,
No.
but it's not much. But it does mean following that civil court ruling about the contract and about Horizon, that the people in prison can now challenge their criminal convictions and say, hey, a judge has ruled the Horizon system is faulty. Why are we here? So they did, and those people had their convictions quashed.
Yay!
Now, the word quashed is the word squashed without the S. It's quite a nice word to say, quashed. When the conviction is quashed, the government says, we're terribly sorry. The police, the criminal system, the courts, the jury, everyone's made a mistake and you can go home.
It was our fault.
It was our fault, you can go home. So how about that poor lady that I saw on the BBC who was taken away from her small child when she was 8 weeks pregnant and put in a very unpleasant London women's prison? Sorry isn't enough, is it?
No.
So at the moment, the government have estimated that the cost of compensating those people will be close to 1 billion.
As it should be.
As it should be.
As it should be.
Everything happens slowly, Rachel, in law. Everything happens slowly. And a lot of those postmasters and postmistresses have died before they got the money. So I hope their children and their grandchildren fight very hard, because a thing like that would shorten your life, wouldn't it?
100%.
And imagine the embarrassment, apart from prison, in your local community. There's the woman who stole the money when actually, she hasn't done anything. So they deserve every single penny of compensation that they get. Now, the next bit of the story, we're going to tax. The post office is actually a PLC. It's a public limited company.
Yeah.
And public limited companies pay a tax called corporation tax. It's the profits of the company. So yes, all the individual employees pay income tax, but at the end of the financial year, the tax authorities look at the accounts and say, oh, corporation tax time. So you pay, as a company, you pay your corporation tax. And when accountants looked at the post office's accounts, because they're public, when you're a PLC, the compensation that they paid in the civil case, which was, do you remember, 58 million, they claimed it as a tax deductible expense. So they tried to what we call write it off in tax. So they took it out of their corporation tax bill. And several accountants online have said, no, that it's not actually a tax deductible expense. So now our tax authority, which is called HMRC, not Her Majesty,
No.
His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which is the tax department.
Who are really fun to be on a phone call with.
They're really fun, yes.
So much fun.
Don't. They're investigating that tax deductible expense. So I hope that's extra pain for the Post Office PLC after everything they did. But then we're coming to the final part of the story, which has just happened. Are you ready? The Post Office accidentally published the names and addresses of all the postmasters involved in a huge accidental data breach.
So they've doxed their information online. That's good.
They've released their information by accident. So after everything those people have been through,
It's
now
just
there's
an
been a
extra
data
stab
breach
in the gut, isn't it?
telling everyone who they are and where they live.
God.
Now, lawyers are looking at that because you cannot breach data like that without paying compensation.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, I feel like you and I should run the post office.
It would be a lot more regimental, I feel.
It would be better, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So that's the story of the biggest miscarriage of justice in British legal history. And if people want to, they can watch it. They made a drama about it last year, and I think the whole country watched it. It was so successful.
Mm.
And it's called Misdebates versus the Post Office. And
Mm.
it's on a channel called ITVX, but I just checked, and in the UK, you can watch it on YouTube. So maybe our listeners can find Misdebates versus the Post Office
Mm.
on YouTube. I hope so.
I'll put it in the description below.
Now, please do. Now, Rachel, here's the bit that, I do this to you every week, something
I
you
know.
might expect. I just watched the trailer for Mr. Bates versus the Post Office,
Okay.
the TV show. It's something like 2 minutes 12. But because they're talking about money, even in that 2 minutes, they use 3 idioms.
Okay.
So first thing is we're going to do these 3 idioms, and then I'm going to let you go and get a big cup of tea to recover from this. The first idiom is a lady in the TV show says, the post office have spent an arm and a leg on and it doesn't work. So what does it mean if you spend
A lot. An arm and a leg is like almost an excessive amount.
It is. It
Yeah.
means you spent an excessive amount of
For
money.
example,
Yeah.
I have 3 pet rats, and as you know, one of them went in for surgery because she had a little lump under her skin. And another one now needs the same surgery. So I have spent an arm and a leg on vet.
I've spent an arm and a leg, and all of our listeners are going to think you're insane because it's not a dog or a cat, it's a
No,
rat.
it's
And
a
there
rat.
we are. Every week, Rachel, we get animals in there.
We do, and
So,
this time it's my babies.
well, for me, spending an arm and a leg, I don't drink coffee, but
No.
I've got a 3-year-old granddaughter who is my 3-year-old overlord. I obey her every instruction. And I spend an arm and a leg on baby chinos from the coffee shop.
Of course.
Baby chinos.
In fairness, though, Catherine, she'll be our next Prime Minister.
I think she might be. She's pretty stern. This kind of thing wouldn't happen.
No, it would
So
not.
if you spend an arm and a leg, you
Mhm.
spend an excessive amount of money.
Yes.
The next one, number 2 of 3, all of our savings are down the pan.
Also to do with my rat story, all of my savings are now down the pan because they are gone.
Yes.
I have none left.
Well, down the pan, really means down the toilet. So
Yeah,
you don't mean that because
No.
you want to spend that
I
money.
do.
But-
Well, I don't want to spend the money, but it's an obligation of mine to spend money. Yes.
So if you say my savings are down the pan, you mean they've gone and they've gone on something stupid.
Silly, yeah.
Yeah. So if your savings are down the pan, you cannot spend an arm and a leg.
No,
because
you
you've got no
can't.
money left.
No.
The third one, Alan Bates himself says, the post office has attacked us and we are just skint little people.
Oh, that's a very northern thing to say.
I think the South says skint.
Do they?
I don't
I
know
didn't know that. I thought that was a very northern thing to say.
skint.
When you're skint, you've got no money.
You're not bankrupt though, are you?
No, you've just got no money until your next payday.
Until your next payday. Yeah. So if I said to you now, Rachel, shall we go to the pub? You might say, I'd love to, but I'm skint.
Yeah. which is not wrong because my rats.
I sometimes say I'm skint when I don't want to go places.
I do the exact same thing.
Yeah, I
It's
think
terrible. My friends now ask me to do things in the house because they know I can't get out of that as easily.
can't escape. Being skint is no excuse.
Mm-hmm.
So if you spend an arm and a leg, you spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
If your savings are down the pan, you've lost your savings and it's probably on something silly.
Yeah.
And if you're skint, just for today and maybe tomorrow, you don't have enough money to do the things you'd like to
Yes.
do, but you're not bankrupt.
Yes.
So Rachel, go and immediately watch the trailer for Mr. Bates
I
versus the Post
absolutely
Office.
will.
And I will be back next week to horrify you with another legal story.
I can't wait. Bye-bye for now.